Hello, everybody. Mr. Foley here, and today we are looking at political culture and ideology and trying to understand, well, first off, what in the world do these words mean? But why do people feel differently about different ideas in government? And what does it mean to be conservative or liberal or maybe libertarian, something like that? So we're going to look at these ideas, and the goal in the end is to understand what influences culture and ideologies in politics. So let's start with some definitions. Political culture. So we're looking at widely shared beliefs, values, norms concerning the relationship between citizens to government and to each other. And so political culture are, what are ideas that most people will agree with for the most part? Okay. Some might agree with them more than others, but we mainly see these. So some of the ideas that we see in America in terms of ideas most people agree with: natural rights, the life to life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. I don't think I've ever met an American that says, I don't want the right to life or property or any of that. We want to be able to live, we want to be able to live freely, and we want to be able to do the things that make us happy. So that fits well. Liberty, freedom. It's a central concept in American history and in our country in general, that we want freedom. Equality, the idea that people should be treated equally under the law and in society in general. Individualism. Um, you know, we are not a culture where everybody wants to be told what to do and how to do it and to act like each other. We're a culture that expresses individuality and appreciates that. Respect for the common person, the idea that everybody should have respect. And, that doesn't mean that we just give respect to the rich people, it means everyone. And a democratic consensus, the idea that whatever the majority votes in should happen as long as it doesn't hurt the minority. And the idea that we should have a rule of law, that there should be a justice system, is pretty big in America. And the last one, I can't see it. I got a screen in the way here. Hold on. Oh my goodness. Optimism. Yeah, we're pretty hopeful that we can keep this thing running in American government and keep things going well. So political efficacy, that's a hard word, efficacy. Political efficacy is how citizens view their own beliefs and whether they believe the system can change, help, or improve their lives. And so, some people really feel like we have a great government going and it can be used to really better our world and to better our own lives. And other people feel like there's some corruption and, change isn't going to happen. So people feel really different about it. So what influences our political beliefs? Where do we get our beliefs from? Right. And so that's something to think about. Your family background. I see this all the time. I have students all the time that will talk about a political candidate or an issue, and it's very clear that a lot of their thoughts have came from their parents. And there's nothing wrong with that. We are obviously influenced by our families. I know I was. But it's just good to understand that and to know that, okay, part of who I am and my political ideas comes from the people I've been around in my family. Religious affiliation. Some religions feel that some things are not okay, and therefore a lot more members in those religions also don't feel that way as well. They feel the same as a religion might. Not always, but sometimes. Gender, um, male, female, how you express yourself, that's going to have a big impact on how you view the world. Education, those who did not finish high school may look at things differently than people that have a master's degree. And ethnicity. This is something that we've seen a lot recently, right? If you look at beliefs and feelings about policing, African Americans, as a group are struggling because there have been some hard issues that we've seen and cases where it could be police brutality and all those elements. And so different ethnicities feel very differently about the government because of their own experiences with it. And lastly, economic status. Rich people and poor people probably view our country differently because of the way money influences your life. The next one is political ideology. This is where we're going to spend most of our time. So political ideology refers to a consistent pattern of ideas or beliefs about political values and the role of government. And so there's a whole grouping that kind of fit together. and that makes up an ideology. So there's two main schools of political ideology that really we find in America. One is liberalism and one is conservatism. And usually liberalism fits more often with Democrats and conservatism fits more often with Republicans. So we're going to look at those two and see, what they tell us about these groups and if you agree with one more than the other. So here we go. All right. The first issue we'll look at the idea of abortion. Okay. Typically, we see liberals are leaning more pro-choice, which means give women the right to have an abortion, whereas conservatives typically are a little bit more pro-life, and feeling that you shouldn't have the right to end the life of a baby during pregnancy. So two very different ideas there. Liberals, typically we see are very pro-marriage equality for all people, whether straight or homosexual. And conservatives have more often been opposed to gay marriage. Liberals have typically been against the death penalty, where you've seen more conservatives have felt that the death penalty is okay in certain situations. Euthanasia or assisted suicide, the belief, the right to end your life if you're dealing with terrible medical situations. So usually we see liberals are more in support of that, whereas conservatives might be against that idea. Liberals usually are very much for separating the church and the state and having very little church involvement in government at all. Conservatives feel that the government shouldn't establish religion, but usually are not as opposed to having some connection between the government and religion. Liberals typically are more in favor of gun control, whereas conservatives usually oppose any changes that might impact their ability to have weapons, to have guns. That's the Second Amendment battle there. Liberals traditionally have been a little bit more lenient with illegal immigration, allowing more groups in, possibly having a little bit more open borders with rules and regulations. Whereas conservatives have been very strict, we've especially seen this in the last 4 or 5 years, this idea they have very strict immigration laws, having closed borders or having very guarded borders, things like that. So two different sides of that issue. Liberals typically are in favor of a government-run healthcare system where all people are guaranteed coverage and it's available to all. And conservatives have mainly been for a competitive healthcare system focusing on individual companies owning insurance, or individual companies that you can purchase insurance from. So individuals have to choose an insurance company instead of it being a state government run system. Affirmative action. So this idea that, how do I say this? Okay, so liberals are more likely for the idea that we're going to provide more opportunities for minorities or groups that maybe have had discrimination against them or hardships in the past. I think that's a good way to say it. It's hard to explain. On the other end, conservatives are less likely to support affirmative action. When it comes to energy, you see that liberals more often than not are much more for renewable energies, and conservatives tend to be more for things like oil and natural gas that you can drill in the United States, because usually that can be less expensive than new renewable energies in the short run, at least. Liberals traditionally big believers that global warming is a problem and it's affecting humans in our world, whereas conservatives that they usually don't feel like global warming is as big of a threat, and they feel that temperature changes are a more natural phenomenon. Liberals favor government regulations of economy, and they support welfare programs. So they feel that businesses should be regulated to protect people, And also, we should have programs in place that are going to care for people. Maybe that could be Social Security or disability benefits or medical programs. Whereas conservatives are much more free market. They believe that it should be more hands off and let the companies run how they do and let individuals take care of themselves. Don't put that on the shoulders of the government. Usually liberals may be a little bit more in favor of high taxes for the wealthy, and conservatives try to keep government small and therefore keep taxes lower for everyone if possible. In the past, we've seen liberals have wanted to keep the US out of foreign military affairs, that kind of thing. And on the other hand, we have conservatives have been really big with the America First mentality, really strong defense, being proactive in stopping terrorism. And so that might lead us into different nations because we're trying to stop terrorism before it starts. Liberals in favor of Common Core and regulating education at a national level, whereas conservatives are much more against that, and they feel it should be more state and local control. And lastly, liberals against school vouchers, against this idea that national and state money will go towards private schools or charter schools. They want to keep that money in the public schools. Whereas conservatives are much more for school vouchers and allowing people to have choice in where they go to school, which could take money away from public schools. So those are your two sides, the big sides that most Americans fit into. And it's really important to look at, what do you believe? What do you agree with? And like I've said before, if you've been in my class, you don't have to agree with everything on one side. I don't. There are some things that are more Democrat that I like, and there are some things that are more Republican that I like. And that's just fine. I think that's reality for most people. But it is good overall to say, okay, what do I believe in? And then to look at the candidates and see, do they agree with the same things I do when you're voting? Now, two other types of ideologies. Socialism is one, and libertarianism is one. So socialism is the idea that we're going to have public ownership of things. You're going to make the government bigger because the government is going to make sure that everybody is taken care of. And so certain industries are going to be nationalized. So maybe the government owns coal and other natural resources for energy so that they can provide a lower cost energy for people. They're going to increase taxes on the wealthy so that the poor aren't struggling as much. They may focus on cutting defensive spending so that money can be spent on people. So socialism really is looking at how do we try to level the playing field for all people. But it is going to mean that those at the top with more money may have to give some of that money up so that everyone's kind of more level. And so we do see some socialist elements in our society where money is used for the good of everybody. Roads and highways are a great example. We all pay taxes for those so that we can all use them together regardless of income. Public schools are another great example. We all pay tax money in, and that goes towards public school and education for all people. But in general, socialism has been limited in popularity in the United States because of the individualistic ideas we've had, and this idea that people should have the right to own property, people should have the right to own their own businesses and things like that. But we have seen more often recently that socialism is gaining a little bit more favor, especially democratic socialism, in the idea that we're going to have a democracy where people can vote, but we're going to try to have socialism as well so that people are more even. There are a lot of concerns about the inequality of income that we see. And so some people want to make changes to that. And lastly, libertarianism. Libertarian is all about individual rights, individual freedom, and keeping government small. So as you can see here, cherishes individual liberties, making sure you have as much freedom as possible. You decrease the government as much as possible. You allow companies and individuals to make business decisions. Stay out of foreign affairs because that's expensive. And don't regulate people in terms of moral and social ideas. So basically, let people make as many decisions as possible and have as small government as possible so it's less expensive so people get to use their money how they want. Um, so this is an idea that some people have. Um, it's definitely not as big as liberalism or conservatism, but there are a good number of Americans that feel like we should have a very small government. We should let businesses do what they want, and people should be able to choose however they want to live morally and socially. So these are your main four. Like I said, libertarianism and socialism, a little smaller than conservatism and liberals. And so, you have to look at those and say, okay, do I agree with these? Which one do I think is the best for me? And, you know, it's good to look at what other people think too, but in the end, it's your decision. And so you have to make that for yourself based on what you think is best. So that is our overview, ladies and gentlemen, of political culture and ideology. If you ever have any questions about this, feel free to talk to any of the social studies teachers. We love talking about this stuff. And especially, we love it when students come up and have some thoughts. So take care.